Part 9. The first explosion came as a muffled roar. Corrun felt the floor tremble underneath his feet. Men and Xanthi stood motionless, looking at each other with widening eyes in which a common doom arose. So it ended. Sharzan and Satsu and their wizard cohorts would be gone. But Croesus, mad, lovely Croesus, was loose, and the gods knew what hell she could brew among the leaderless Xanthi. The walls groaned as another boom echoed down their length. Well, death came to every man, and he had not done so badly. Corrun began to realize how weary he was. He was bleeding from wounds, and breath was raw in his lungs. The Umlotuans hammered on the door in panic, but the 20 or fewer survivors could never break it down. The devil powder roared. The floor heaved sickeningly under Corrun's feet. He heard the crash of collapsing masonry. Wait! One chance, by the gods! Be ready to run out when the walls topple, he shouted. We'll have a little time. The Xanthi were fleeing in terror. The humans stood alone, waiting while the explosions rolled and banged around them. Cracks zigzagged across the walls. Dust choked the dank air. Crash! Corrun saw the nearer wall swaying, toppling. The floor lifted and buckled, and he fell to the lurching ground. All the world was an insanity of racket and ruin. The lintel caved in, the portal sagged. Corrun leaped for the opening like a pouncing Irene. The men swarmed with it out through the widening hole, while the roof came down behind them. Someone screamed, a faint, lost sound in the grinding fury of sundering stone. Rocks were flying. Corrun saw one of them crack a man's head like a melon. Wildly he ran as the outer facade came down. There was a madness of storm outside, wind screaming to fill the sky, driving solid sheets of rain and hail before it. The incessant, blinding lightning glared in a cold, shadowless brilliance. The brawling thunder drowned the roar of exploding devil powder. They fought out through the courtyard past the deserted outer gate. There came a blast which seemed to crack the sky. Corrun was knocked down as by a giant's fist. He lay in the mud and saw a pillar of flame lift toward the heavens with the castle fountaining up on its wings. Thunder roared over the earth, shouting to the storm that raged in the heavens. Corrun picked himself up and leaned dizzily against a tree, stripped clean by the blast. Rain slanted across the ground, churning the mud beneath his feet, the livid lightning glare blazing above. Vaguely, through ringing, deafened ears, he heard the wild clamor of the sea. Looking down the cataract which the upward trail had become, he saw the Bracea rocking in the wind where she lay on the beach. He gestured to Imazu, who staggered up to join him. His voice was barely audible over the shouting wind. "Take the men down there. We can't sail in this storm, but make the ship fast. Stand guard over her. If I'm not back when the storm is done, start for home." "Where are you going?" cried the Umlotuan. "I'll be back, maybe. Stay with the ship." Corrun turned and slogged across the ground toward the jungle. Weariness was gone. He was like a machine running without thought or pain until it burned out. Croesus would have fled toward the high ground, he thought dully. Behind him, Imazu started forward, then checked himself. Something of the ultimate loneliness that was in Corrun must have come to the Umlotuan. It was not a mission on which any other man might go. And they had to save the ship. He gestured to his few remaining men, and they began the slow climb down to the beach. The castle was a heap of shattered rock, still moving convulsively as the last few boxes of devil powder exploded. The rain boiled down over it, churning through the fragments. Lightning flamed in the berserk heavens. Karun pushed through underbrush that clutched at his feet and clawed at his skin. The sword was still hanging loosely in one hand, nicked and blunted with battle. He went on mechanically, scarcely noticing the wind-whipped trees that barred his way. It came to him that he was fighting for Cromon, the thalassocrat of Akera, ruler by right of conquest over Konahor. But there are worse things than foreign rule if it was human, and one of the greater evils had fled toward the mountain. Presently he came out on the bare rocks above the fringe of jungle growth. The rain hammered at him, driven by a wind that screamed like a maddened beast. Thunder boomed and rolled overhead, a roar of doom answering the thud of his heart. The water rushed over his ankles, foaming down toward the sea. She stood, waiting for him, atop a high, bare hill. Her cloak was drawn tightly about her slender body, but the wind caught at it, whipped and tore it. Her rain-wet hair blew wild. "Karun!" she called under the gale. "Karun!" "I am coming," he said, not caring if she heard him or not. He struggled up to where she stood, limned against the sheeted fire in heaven. They faced each other while the storm raged around them. "Karun!" She read death in his eyes as he lifted the sword. Her form blurred, the outlines of a monster grew in his eyes. He laughed bitterly. "Ha! I know what your magic is," he said. "You saw me kill Satsu." She was human again, human and lovely, a light-footed spirit of the hurricane. Her face was etched white in the lightning glare. "Pareus!" she screamed. The Irene crept forth, belly to the ground, tail lashing. Hell glared out of the ice-green eyes. Karun braced himself, sword in hand. Pareus sprang, not straight at the man, but into the air. His wings caught the wind, whirling him aloft. Twisting in mid-flight, he arrowed down. Karun struck at him. The Irene dodged the blow, and one buffeting wingtip caught the man's wrist. The sword fell from Karun's hand. At once the Irene was on him. Karun fell under that smashing attack. The Irene's fangs gleamed above his throat. The claws sank into his muscles. He flung up an arm, and the teeth crunched on it, grinding at the bone. Karun wrapped his legs in a scissor lock around the gaunt body, pressing himself too close for the clawed hind feet to disembowel him. His free hand reached out, gouging. He felt an eyeball tear loose, and the Irene opened his mouth in a thin scream. Karun pulled his torn arm free. He struck with a balled fist at the devil beast, and felt his knuckles break under the impact. But bone snapped. Pareus's jaw hung suddenly loose. The Irene sprang back, and Karun lurched to hands and feet. Pareus edged closer, stiff-legged. Karun stumbled erect, and Pareus charged. One great wing smashed out, brought the man toppling back to earth. Pareus leaped for his exposed belly. Karun lashed out with both feet. The thud was dull and hollow under the racketing thunder. Pareus tumbled back, and Karun sprang on him. The barbed tail slashed, laying Karun's thigh open. He fell atop the struggling beast and got his free hand on the throat. The mighty wings threshed, half lifting the man and Irene. Karun pulled himself over on the writhing back. He locked legs around the body, arms around the neck, and heaved. The Irene yowled. His wings clashed together with skull-cracking force, barely missing the head of the man who hugged his back. His tail raked against Karun's back, seeking the vitals. Karun gave another yank. He felt the supple spine bending. "Heave!" Pareus lifted a brassy scream. The strange, dry sound of snapping vertebrae crackled out. Karun rolled away from the threshing form. Pareus gasped, lifted his broken head, and looked with filming green eyes at Croesus, where she stood unmoving against the white fire of the sky. Slowly, painfully, he dragged himself toward her. Breath rattled in and out of his blood-filled lungs. "Boreas!" Croesus bent over to touch the great head. The Irene sighed. His rough tongue licked her feet. Then he shuddered and lay still. "Boreas!" Charon climbed to his feet and stood shaking. There was no strength left in him. It was running out through the dozen yawning wounds. The ground whirled and tilted crazily about him. He saw her standing against the sky, and slowly, he came toward her. Croesus picked up a stone and threw it. It seemed to take an immense time arcing toward him. Some dim corner of his buckling consciousness realized that it would knock him out, that she could then kill him with the sword and escape into the hills. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. The stone crashed against his skull, and the world exploded into darkness. End of Part 9.